Welcome Julie Urban to our committee.
I'm sorry,
Hi,
Warren, I
Julie.
didn't hear you.
Hello. I'm Julie.
Welcome.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Would you like to tell us a little about your background, Julie?
Let's see. I'm retired from state government. I worked for the Public Service Commission in electrical transmission. I'm an economist. And so I worked on electrical transmission policy and project analysis. I also worked on those same issues for the Minnesota Attorney General's office. And I have a PhD in natural resource economics. And I did research for USGS as a graduate student. And I guess that's enough,
Yeah,
unless you have questions.
very good. Appreciate that. So the first item of business, election of a new chair. So we have any nominations?
I'll nominate Warren.
I'll second it.
Are there any other nominations? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So I guess I'm chair for another year.
I missed the second there. Will you guys say your names, please, when you,
Oh, Sue Pellman.
okay, sorry.
So next item of business is appointment of a vice chair, and Ken's been the vice chair in the past.
Ramsey will nominate Potter.
I'll second that.
What happens when you don't show up?
I'll second that, and this is Warren.
Thank
So
you.
have you expressed any willingness to not be the vice chair?
Pardon?
What's that, Warren?
What'd you say, Jim? I'm sorry.
I asked if Ken has expressed any reluctance to continue as vice chair.
Not that I know of.
Good enough for me.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I-
Opposed? So Ken is the vice chair. So next we have appointments to stormwater utility.
No,
And
minutes.
in the
that's-
past,
We gotta
Jim-
do, Warren, I think we need to approve the minutes.
Pardon?
I think we need to approve the minutes from April.
Oh, yeah, okay. We need a motion for approval of the minutes from April 17th.
I move we approve the minutes for April as written. This is Sue.
Do we have a second? No,
Ramsey will
I'll second it.
second. Okay, go ahead, Warren.
Okay, this is Warren, I'll second it. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? So the minutes are approved. And now we have members in our committee also serve on the Stormwater Utility Board. And in the past, me, Ken and Jim have served on that. Are you willing to continue, Jim?
Yep.
And I will. And I guess at this point, can we assume Ken will too, unless he tells us otherwise?
I think
What do you
that's,
think, Eric?
I think that's fine.
Or Dan, is that kosher?
Yep, that's kosher.
Yep, okay. So the other one then is appointment to the CLC committee, and Dan, you've served in that in the past year.
Mhm. I would be happy to do it again unless someone else would like the opportunity. I'm more than willing to let somebody else have the opportunity.
Would anybody else like to volunteer? If not, that'd be great, Dan.
Okay,
I think we need motions for both of those, Warren, don't we?
for the one to CLC, Warren appoints his he either serves or appoints as designee. So I don't think we need a motion.
Do we need to take a step back, Dan, for the swab?
Yeah, I'm looking at the swab to see, maybe for the swab, we better have a motion just to make sure that we're complying with the ordinance, because I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly how it reads. So
If you wanna move
just to
on,
make
I'll
sure,
look up the
just to make
ordinance.
sure we're okay, I would nominate Warren, Ken, and Jim to serve on the Stormwater Utility Board.
I would second that. So,
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay.
So the next item then is a summary of streamflow and water quality data for Pheasant Branch. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I think my sound got turned down. I'm not sure how to turn it back up again. Anyway, every year, Julie, I make a presentation, or someone does, summarizing the data that we've collected. We have 3 gauging stations on Pheasant Branch, one at Parmenter Street, one at the South Fork at Deming Way, and one at Airport Road. And we collect streamflow data, sediment data, and phosphorus data. And so every year, I kind of go through a quick summary to let people know, let us know how we're doing. So the next slide. This is annual precipitation that occurred, and I do it on a water year basis, but that's what USGS, the gauging stations, Julie, are maintained by the US Geological Survey, and they're funded by the city of Middleton in cooperation with USGS. And I think, and I know Dane County contributes some for the phosphorus data. So this is the precipitation data for the full year, starting in October 1, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. And that's what USGS calls the 2020 water year. And you could see we're up close to 38 inches. And if you add on, they don't record snowfall. So if you add on snow, we had about 50 inches. That equal about 5 inches of precip. So that puts us about 43 inches per year. And for the 3rd straight year, we're above normal, or maybe longer than that. Long-term average now is 35 inches. Next slide. This is the gauging station at Pheasant Branch at Middleton that we've been operating since 1975. And you could see that the largest flow was back on October 2nd. And we recorded 800, and I can't remember exactly, 30 CFS. And that's about the 10-year flood. The 2-year flood is about 300 CFS, and we've had about 3 other events that were equal to that. So normally in a year, you might get 1 2-year event flood, and now we've had 4 that exceeded it. The next slide is kind of the same thing. It's a South Fork. And you could see there's a lot more peaks. That's because of the large amount of impervious area there, that we tend to be a lot flashier stream. And in into July, we had a flood peak close to 500 CFS on the South Fork. The next slide is the one on the North Fork. And you can notice in July that the North Fork only got up to around 200 CFS, where the South Fork was 500. And a good part of that is probably the impervious area on the South Fork has a lot more runoff than the North Fork, especially during the summer when the corn is up. Its flood peaks are a lot lower because of the infiltration and retarding the flow. So next slide then is a summary. And I just summarized the data for the 3 stations. And with the North Fork has a drainage area of 9.7 square miles, and South Fork 6.1, and then Pheasant Branch at Parmenter is 18. And I just listed the annual flow for the year of 2,400 at the North Fork, 1,320 at the South Fork, and 5,300 at Pleasant Branch. The peak discharges, as I mentioned before, were 834 CFS, or the 10-year flood at Parmenter Street. And the South Fork, it was 463, but it wasn't on the same date. It was a different date. And the North Fork was 320. And I calculated the annual sediment load for the year. And the North Fork had 1,260 tons of sediment and 10,800 pounds of phosphorus. The South Fork had 449 tons of sediment and 2,097 pounds of phosphorus. At our gauging station, the annual sediment load was 850, and the annual phosphorus load was 10,300. In between those two stations, Julie, there's a confluence pond. I don't know if you're familiar with Pheasant Branch.
Yes.
Confluence pond does a good job of trapping sediment and phosphorus, and that's why you see, if you add up the North Fork and South Fork, it's more than we have at Branch Street. Next slide. This just shows the distribution of the load into the confluence pond for sediment. And as you can see, the North Fork has 61% of the sediment load, or 1,260 tons, opposed to the South Fork, which was 22%, or 450 tons. The intermediate area is estimated based on the flow and load ratios of the South Fork, and the same with the North Fork intermediate area. Our two gauging stations don't measure the total contribution to the confluence pond. Next slide. This is the phosphorus load, and you can see the phosphorus load is much higher in the North Fork than sediment load was. There's 10,800 pounds of phosphorus, or 74% of the phosphorus load. And that's probably, or mainly, because of agricultural practices on the North Fork. Well, the South Fork only contributed 14%, or 2,100 pounds. Then the next slide. This one here I just put together to show the trapping efficiency of confluence pond. So the inflow to and sediment to the confluence pond was 2,063 tons, and the outflow was 687. So we trapped 1,376 tons of sediment. The next one is a phosphorus load. So the inflow was 14,600 pounds of phosphorus, and the outflow was 9,570. So we trapped 5,030 pounds of phosphorus. The next slide just shows a history of how much has been trapped from 2012. And so you can see the percent trapped for sediment has varied from a low of 34% up to high of 89%, where in 2020 we trapped about 67%. And we're averaging 60.3%, 63 or 64% every year of sediment. And percent trapped of phosphorus was 29% for an average, or in 2020 we were trapped 34%. And we varied from a low of like 14% up to a high of 41%. So that's kind of a summary of what we did in 2020. Is there any questions?
Warren, are the low percent trapping years corresponding to high flow years or low flow years?
It seemed like it varies, so I'm not, see, like the real low one is 11,000. You look at the inflow, it's 11,000. So I don't have the flow on here. So I guess looking back at it, I couldn't make any, I think it depends on the event and when it occurs. So I haven't studied it in detail, but it's not straightforward. So
When was the last time the pond was dredged?
Pardon?
Do we know when the last time the pond was dredged?
Yeah, like 5 years ago, maybe. 6 years ago.
I don't know. I have a hard time. I can't remember how to turn up my sound. Can someone help me with that?
Turned down.
Turn it up.
Do you have a black bar at the bottom of your screen that you
Yeah,
can?
yeah.
Is there either a speaker icon or a little up arrow maybe that says show hidden icons?
You might have to exit full screen view to see that bar.
Yes. Upper right, Warren. There should be a little view, I think it says, and if you click on that, it'll give you some options to exit full screen.
I'm trying to make sense of this, focusing on am I on mute or I'm on, the sediment trapping. Because it, certainly takes a jump there in 2015 and 16. And I can't remember when the dredging was done. We should know that.
Well,
And
Eric was, it was 2016, Eric.
For
No, it was
confluence,
later than that, 2018, I think.
for confluence dredging?
Yeah,
yeah,
No, I think it was before that.
It was done at the same time we established the stormwater utility.
It was 2014.
wasn't part of that cost paid for with the utility money?
No, we paid for it out of capital borrowing. That's when council finally realized they needed to start funding these projects.
so it wasn't 2017, it was before that.
It
Before
might
that.
have been dredged then, but I think the project started before then. Seemed like we had a couple years of delay in getting that actually done. I was gonna look up the project number now to see when we initiated the project.
I was expecting to see an improvement in trapping after it was dredged, but then we had that 2018, we had so much
Right,
flooding take place that it kind of overwhelmed it.
right. That's what I was thinking. The heavy rains can basically negate the dredging or at least make it less effective.
It was
Yeah.
2016.
It's 2016, so 17 would have been the first year.
Yep.
I don't know.
Is there any more questions on? We have a very good data set to evaluate what's taken place, and it does show that we've been effective, even without, and I'll get into that in the next presentation, I guess. There's no sense talking about it again. So if there's no more, we'll move on to the next one. As I mentioned back in, I think, January, I thought it was important that we document what we've done and how effective our management program has been. Herb Garn and Bill Rose and me did a report with USGS back in 2010. About 10 years have taken place since then. So I thought I'd like to do something. So I submitted an abstract to Stormwater for publication in their magazine. And the abstract got approved. So I'm in the process of writing a report. In the meantime, Stormwater has an annual conference taking place in Milwaukee in September. So I submitted an abstract to that and they accepted that. So got a place on the program for making a presentation like this. So I just put some slides together and I haven't really put together a talk, but I'll run through the slides and show you what I have in mind. And I'd like to have your input about what we should show or not. So essentially, the title have right now is Middleton Stormwater Management Program 1975 to 2020 and effects of climate change and urbanization. The purpose of the talk was our presentation to show the effectiveness of Middleton Stormwater Management Program over the period 1975 to 2020. And the study shows how stream flow and water quality were affected by climate change and urbanization. And the analysis provides areas where the city should focus efforts to reduce flood peaks and decrease sediment and phosphorus loads. So, you know, a lot of you, this is old hat, we already know this, but we'll run through it anyway, because Julie's first time she's been exposed to it. So Middleton Stormwater Management Commission was formed in 1974. And there, back in the early 70s, there was a lot of concern about the increased channel erosion of Pheasant Branch. And another concern was the sediment and phosphorus loads that were going into Lake Mendota, contributing to the extensive algae blooms that occur every year. So the purpose of the commission is to protect and enhance the water resources of Middleton. And in 1979, a stormwater ordinance was developed to prevent flood peaks from increasing due to urbanization. And the ordinance was modified in subsequent years to reduce sediment and phosphorus loads into Lake Mendota and to protect groundwater recharge. Next slide. And another thing that we did early on was, like I just talked about, was to gather stream flow information. So we introduced into a program, entered into a program with the U.S. Geological Survey in 1975. And on the main stem at Parmenter Street, we started collecting stream flow and sediment data, and then phosphorus data in 1993. In the South Fork, we collected data in 1978 to 1981. That was funded by the Corps of Engineers. And then in 2012, we started collecting data because we wanted more information on how effective the confluence pond was operating. So next slide looks back at the annual precipitation that has occurred since 1975. And as you can see, it was started out around 30. Back in 1975, the average, long-term average was 32 inches, and right now it's 35. But in recent years, it's been well over 40. And in 2018, when we had the large flood, we were close to 70 inches. And that has a major impact on how we try to evaluate the effectiveness of our management program. So the next slide. This is the annual stream flow at Parmenter Street, and you can see that the tremendous increase we've had in annual flow because of the increase in stream flow. We went from around 1,000 CFS days back in 1975 to close to 7,000 in 2017, 18, 19, and even 2020, we're way above 5,000. And the next one is annual flood peaks. And again, the same thing is taking place. Annual flood peaks keep on increasing. And in 2018, we had one of 3,300 CFS, which is greater than the 500-year flood. While 2019 was greater than the 20-year flood, and then last year was a 10-year flood. Next slide. I wanted some way to show the increase. And so I looked at precipitation, and the report that we did back in 2010 showed a sharp break in the relationship between precipitation and runoff in 1993. So I decided to quantify the changes that taken place over that 46-year period that we've got. I broke it up into three periods: 1975 to 89, 1990 to 2004, and 2005 to 2020. And as you could see, the increase from the early period to the latter period for precipitation was 30%, where the average annual flow increased 137%, and the average annual flood peaks increased 96%.
Lauren, did those include the big event in August 2018?
Pardon? What's the biggest?
include the large flood event in August?
Yeah, I did in this analysis. In some analysis, I took it out because we don't have good data for some of the sediment and phosphorus load. But I did leave it in here for stream flow and flood peaks.
Okay.
So it does bias, no question about it. I was wondering why I thought the annual flood peaks would be increased as much as the annual stream flow, but it appears like the confluence pond may be knocking down the annual flood peaks. And I know when Mars did the rainfall runoff model, they were able to show that the confluence pond was reducing the annual flood peaks about 10 to 15%. So that might explain a little bit of the difference. Next one. This is the annual sediment loads, and you could see the trend line shows that we've have a significant decrease in sediment loads going early on from 6,000 tons per year. And then in 2002, we put the confluence pond in operation, and you could see a more dramatic decrease in sediment loads, except for 2018, as you mentioned, Caroline. I did include in here to show it, but the 2018 data at Parmenter Street was affected by a large bank failure just upstream. So I didn't use it when I can calculate the trapping efficiency in the confluence pond. I just omitted that storm. But I did show it here because that is what went by the Dayton station and what got deposited in the Pheasant Branch Marsh and into Lake Mendota.
I think, Warren,
Yeah.
you'll have to explain to the audience the magnitude of that 2018 event and those things you just said about the bank failure and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was better than a 500-year event, so
yeah,
that's pretty extreme.
Right.
I think UHG said 500-year plus. But one of the problems I found out after I submitted the paper, I only got about 8 to 10 minutes for the presentation. And my presentation is going to be a lot longer than that. So
yeah.
I have to make some drastic cuts in order to get it to fit in.
Yeah.
I was surprised that most conferences that I'm familiar with give about 20 minutes to a presentation. So we'll see what happens. The next one, like, so generally speaking, the relationship, as we know, is when flows increase, so do sediment loads increase. So in our case, sediment loads are decreasing in spite of increasing trend here in stream flow. And this plot just shows the relationship of sediment loads decreasing and stream flow increasing. The next one is phosphorus. And we had the same decreasing trend, but it's not as significant as it was. And 2018 and 19 and 20 changed that. Prior to that, we were looking really good. You can see after the confluence pond was put in operation that that we'd had some decrease. Part of the reason, of course, why we don't trap as much phosphorus is a lot of it's dissolved, and dissolved phosphorus is not trapped by the confluence pond. Only that phosphorus that's attached to the sediments is being trapped. So that's why we don't do nowhere near as good trapping phosphorus, unfortunately.
So Warren, do you have any, are you going to make any comments on the reason for these trends?
Later on, I'm going to, in this talk, I'm going to try and separate urbanization from climate change.
Okay.
If that's what you mean.
Just the fact that the sediment trend has been decreasing, it could be a lot of reasons, and didn't know if you had some thoughts on that.
Well, hopefully we put in, I didn't mention that, we put in over 100 stormwater management facilities in Middleton since we started. And I assume that they are effective. Confluence Pond, we could evaluate, but the smaller ones, we can't, like South Fork Pond is a significant size pond and it's hard to evaluate because we don't have the data.
Right.
And that probably should be brought out more. And there's a number in Madison that have been put in place too on the South Fork. The next slide then, and this again shows our relationship with streamflow and phosphorus. The next slide. This is the same one I showed before, so we don't have to go over it. And I don't know if this is too much data for the presentation, but it just shows those averages. And maybe I would just show the long-term average and not show the breakdown by year, except the breakdown shows there is quite a bit of variation in how much we trap. Since the confluence pond was built, we trapped 16,000 tons of sediment and 53,000 pounds of phosphorus in the confluence pond, which is pretty impressive. So this in 2012 to 2020 gives how much percentage of sediment. 54% of the sediment load came from North Fork and 24% from the South Fork. And then the intermediate areas. And the phosphorus load, again, 71% came from the North Fork because of the agricultural practices, manure spreading. And years where we have manure spreading on frozen ground is when we get the biggest loads. Like in 2019, there was a large snowmelt runoff in 2019 in February, and our loads were very large because of that. And so there's a big discrepancy between phosphorus load, the North Fork and the South Fork. And the next slide, I wanted to, we have this data on the South Fork and the North Fork. The South Fork is an urbanizing basin, and we had data back in 1978 to 81 where there was very little urbanization in the South Fork, and so it was mainly a lot of rural area at that time. Well, the North Fork has remained essentially rural for since then. And so we have data on the South Fork that's pre-urbanization, then after urbanization, compared to data on the North Fork, which is mainly rural. So I did the same comparison looking at differences in precipitation, and we could see between those two periods that the precipitation increased 34%. And the average annual flow on the South Fork, North Fork, increased from 69 CFS per square mile. I did this on a square mile basis because the North Fork is about 50% bigger than the South Fork, and that increased 160%. Where on the South Fork, which when it urbanized, it went from 31 CFS per square mile to 196, or a 525% increase. And then the confluence pond at Parmenter Street is a combination of both of them. But you could see the dramatic increase we had in the urbanizing basin. And my assumption is that what we see in the North Fork is the effect of climate change that it kind of increased because of increased precipitation. And then in the South Fork, it's a combination of climate change and urbanization. Next slide. It's the same thing when you're looking at flood peaks. And so the North Fork increased 164%. Well, the South Fork increased 633%. And the confluence pond is kind of a combination. And then we have, downstream of the confluence pond at Parmenter Street, it increased 182%. So again, this, in my mind, this points out the effect of climate change, that kind of increase that's taken place, and then the combination on the South Fork. The next slide. Oh, these I probably won't show, but I just did a bar graph showing the same thing, and I don't know if you think a bar graph is better than those tables, but it essentially shows the same data in a different format. And this is for the average annual flow. And the next one is flood peaks. And I don't know which one's better. I think the table presents the data maybe a little better, but this one grabs the eye easier. Okay, then in summary, Middleton's stormwater management program has been very effective in reducing sediment and phosphorus loads. Since 2002, the annual sediment load has decreased 56% and the annual phosphorus load decreased 48%. Confluence Pond has trapped 64% of the sediment load and 29% of the phosphorus load. Climate change and urbanization have caused the annual flow to increase 136% and the annual flood peaks to increase 96%. A comparison of the urbanized South Fork to the rural North Fork showed the annual flood peaks increased 632% for the South Fork compared to 182% for the North Fork. The North Fork contributes 15,700 pounds of, or 71% of the phosphorus load into Lake Mendota. In summary, the Streamflow data collection program was critical for evaluating the effectiveness of the stormwater management program. And I don't know how we would have evaluated if we didn't have that kind of a data program. And the next slide then is just future considerations. So if we're going to look at reducing flood peaks or minimize the increase due to climate change and urbanization, more stringent controls will be required on the North Fork, because we had some controls on the South Fork and we didn't do a very good job. So I think if the North Fork urbanizes, and it probably will someday, we ought to look at our ordinance and see if we should make them more stringent. Like I think Madison's already gone up to the 200-year flood, right, Caroline? And maybe we ought to think about that too.
Yep, they have.
To reduce flood peaks, efforts should be made with the city of Madison to retrofit some of the existing development on the South Fork. And to reduce phosphorus loads, future efforts should be concentrated on the North Fork since it has the largest load. And if climate change continues in Middleton, Middleton should be prepared for continued repairs to Pheasant Branch, because the way direction we're going right now, I know we've put a lot of money into Pheasant Branch and doing it, and we hope we don't have damage in the future, but unless the trend of climate change changes, I think we're going to be into a period of constant maintenance on the Pheasant Branch channel. And that's it. I think it took more than 10 minutes.
Thanks, Warren.
So got one problem is when I did this, Gary was, I was worried about if I would be able to go to Milwaukee and make the presentation. I can't be gone from home. I got some situation where I can't do it, but Gary, I thought if I couldn't make it, that Gary would be willing or could make the presentation, but then he went and retired. So right now, I'm not sure what to do. I guess if someone would like to make the presentation, I'd be glad to pass on the PowerPoint and help with putting it together. I'll send out a copy of the program. A preliminary program is already available. It's a 3-day program. The presenter doesn't have to pay registration fees. So I don't know if anybody would be interested in doing it. I think it'd be a good program to attend for. You might be interested in attending, Eric. I think there's a lot of good ideas out of stormwater. And Jim, you've been on the board, haven't you, for a number of years?
Yeah. No, sorry. It's a big conference. Yeah.
It's a good applied conference, I think. A lot of ones like more technical ones, you get more theory and not as much applied information as this. And the Stormwater magazine actually is pretty good. It's a free magazine, so if people want it, I always enjoy reading it and get some ideas.
Caroline's done a lot of presentations there also in the past, and workshops. We did a lot of workshops at StormCon.
Oh. Well, is someone interested in running with this at the conference?
I am not going to be in town that week.
Yeah.
Warren, I can't commit to it. I'm sorry.
Well, Ken's not here. We could always nail him.
There you go.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, you know, 10, you have to make a presentation. Well, I got to decide pretty soon because I can't leave them hanging. If I'm going to back out of it, I should let them know so I could fill in my slot. Right, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll send a copy of the agenda out to members of the committee, and you take a look at it and see what you think. So you don't think you'd be interested in Eric?
I'm not sure. I just can't, I'm saying I can't commit. What do you think your deadline is before you'd have to pull out of it, I guess?
I don't know. I could ask him. I'll send you the agenda, and it might be,
Yeah,
and I don't know if the city sends employees to conferences or not.
I can't answer that either.
Dan, do you know?
Some, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're planning this one or not, but some conferences, yes.
Yeah,
It's in September 13th, 15th.
yeah. Well, I would like to hope that my situation will change, but my guess is it's not going to get worse. So anyway, what's the next item then of business?
You had asked for us to distribute the fireworks fallout information that
Oh, yeah.
Jim had tracked down after the last meeting.
At our last meeting, we talked about percolates, and we didn't have any decision on what we're going to do, but Jim volunteered to contact Madison and see what they did because of moving the fireworks from Warner Park to Lake Mendota. And Jim got a lot of good information. It's pretty lengthy. If you go to page 18, I think there's a good summary that I think would be.
Of the Warner Park thing, Warren?
Yeah, I think it's page 18 of, I think of our.
Oh, of our, well, coincidentally, it's the same page.
I don't think it's their
Not
page 18. I
this.
think it's your page 8. Whoops, I think you went there. No.
While Eric's searching, does anybody know, is that still being sought? The fireworks sponsors?
For the
At Middleton Air.
yes, they're still going to be still looking for a fireworks permit, and they have gotten the okay from the fire department and
Okay.
let the people know. But this, you know, and like I said at the last meeting, we have to look at this holistically. We're not looking at it strictly as, well, what does this say in reference to what the airport?
Right.
Somebody requesting fireworks at the airport, because that's really no different than requesting fireworks at firefighters park, which there have been, or fireworks at the high school. So,
Right.
Well, no, you're right, but a little different. There's a wetland area there, which might have some impact. But I think if we get to page 18, I think the summary is pretty general and it will apply to wherever fireworks are taking place.
well,
The
Is this-
recommendation.
yeah, I think the recommendations, we should, you know, I'll take that to the next L&O committee, and when we talk about permitting for fireworks displays, we'll look at including these, that, you know, the shell fragments are cleaned up and misfires or duds, you know, all the recommendations that they have. I think that's legitimate that we, you know, add that into our permitting process.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I mean, essentially try and get fireworks without percolates in them and then pick up debris afterwards. I should have marked down.
I'm sorry, Warren. I mean, here's the conclusions page, but
There, right there.
Yeah, you're right there.
Back up.
There you go.
Yeah. I would say that we ought to copy that and send it on to the city council that this is our recommendation for all fireworks. I don't think there's anything that's, and they say that they didn't think monitoring was required. So I think it's pretty good guidelines for the city to follow. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I'll make a motion then that we refer this item to License and Ordinance Committee to take a look at incorporating these recommendations into the fireworks permitting process. Did you get all that, Eric? Because don't make me repeat it.
Hopefully this is being recorded. Refer it to licensing and ordinance.
Yes, please.
I'll second that.
Yeah, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion's carried then. Next item then is more,
Next item is potentially switching the order of SWUB and water resources committees.
and the reason is I wouldn't miss SWAB meetings that way.
Well, and of course, SWUB talked about this first, and, didn't come to any hard conclusions or advice. And Rich, I kind of skipped out at the end of the meeting there. What is the, or maybe Susan can speak to it.
Susan can give a summary recommendation.
What we came up with, or at least a possibility, is for items that are relevant to both committees to put them on the agenda at the beginning and have both SWUB and water resources meet together. We still haven't dealt with issues that would just come before SWUB specifically, but at least this would be a way that we could do it jointly and save time and not have to put, there's a problem with if water resources does something, SWUB frequently needs to approve it then before it goes to council. And it delays it a month if we have SWUB first before water resources. So we were going to try the joint meeting and see how that works.
Yeah, I've never been in favor of joint meetings. We tried that before and I didn't think it worked that well.
Well, we do this at city council for finance and personnel. And so we have the same presentation. Each committee makes its own motions and votes separately.
So that means all water resource committee has to go to the SWAB meetings.
No, what it means is
Yeah.
SWUB would go to the first part of water resource meetings.
I'm not sure I follow you. So you would have the first.
So what Susan is saying is if there is an item that both SWUB and water resources has to weigh in on, then after the SWUB meeting, there'd be in between the SWUB and water management, there'd be a joint meeting.
So how would water resources know when to join the meeting or be there? They'd have to be available.
It would have to be put on the agenda as a joint meeting, then there'd have to be a start time.
So SWAB would have to be done with their just SWAB only items by a certain time.
Right.
Right.
It's in my opinion, it's actually cleaner if we just put the water resources meeting first.
I agree.
I think if we do that, it'll have to be a pretty good effort on our part, on Rich and my part, to estimate the time of the meeting. And, I guess SWUB would have to be willing to have kind of a shifting meeting time each month. Might be it.
Yeah, we might have to. We might have to try a little harder to keep to our 90 minutes on.
Maybe what we could do is only have one actual Zoom meeting and try to time it such that the SWUB folks could come in midway through the meeting and not have to log out and log in. Currently, we have two separate meetings where it's two separate Zoom meetings where you log in to one and then you log out and then log back in. If there was just one meeting that covered both of them. I mean, you could, on the agenda, you could put the same meeting number ID on that meeting and just have them join in later, essentially. I mean,
Right.
we can try whatever works.
Rich, the one thing I would ask, just so that SWUB members who aren't members of Water Resources or myself, so that they don't have to sit through huge amounts of Water Resources. For Water Resources, try to keep on a tight schedule.
I think that's equally difficult for both groups, but
Right, it
but
is.
we'll
But
just have
if
to lean harder on.
SWUB is going to be second, I think Water Resources should try to not drag out too long.
Generally speaking, SWAB's been shorter than Water Resources. Except after the flood, we had a lot of discussions on contracts and maintenance items, so. But generally, SWAB is only about, half hour to an hour meeting.
Right, that's why I'm saying if Water Resources could make sure that their meeting doesn't go beyond the time for SWUB to start, this would work.
Well, I
So
think-
would it be feasible for SWUB to meet the next evening, like Thursday? The next meeting after,
That's putting 2 meetings on staff, or 2 nights.
2 nights, okay.
And it would also conflict with, I don't know if it would conflict with other other meetings that people have to go to.
I think it's more of an issue that it for staff, it creates another night, because for the
Right.
most part, we don't have any meetings on Thursday nights. It's unusual.
That is true.
I should
think
say
we
no
ought to keep it-
regularly scheduled meetings on Thursday nights.
I have city council meetings on Thursday nights.
So that would be a real problem for you, Rich.
But it's not Middleton's problem. It'd be mine.
No, but we still need to be considerate.
I think it's a rarity where Water Resources has an issue that is going to affect SWUB and they have to wait a month. I think we ought to keep it the way it is. And then when we have one that comes, then we have a joint meeting like was proposed. Because I think that doesn't happen all that often.
Well, Warren, I would say, since these are financial decisions SWUB is making, the sooner we can get it to council, better, because this week or this month, it was problematic in that council voted on multiple things without SWUB even having a chance to see it until the day afterwards. And that's not a real good solution.
Yeah.
So in these meetings though, then if there's a joint meeting, then Water Resources, the more technical committee will make a recommendation at that meeting and then the SWAB committee would take it from there.
Yes,
So SWAB wouldn't participate in the technical discussion?
no,
Water Resources would make a recommendation to SWUB.
Okay. I have a hard time picturing that, but
Would it be possible to just flip the meetings when a situation presents itself?
Based on what the agenda items are.
I think that'd be the easiest way to do it.
Isn't that what we've done in the past several times?
no.
No, okay.
And I don't have a lot of history, so, and neither does Eric. We'd look to the committee members for that information.
We can certainly do it that way. That just puts the onus on staff to make sure that they know that that's coming up and they get that information to the committee members soon enough so that everybody can plan to be there. So it just puts a little bit more work on you to make sure you communicate.
I think for efficiency, I know certainly I'm willing to continue the great coordination I have with Eric already. And just make that happen. Make it a priority to make that happen.
Okay, so then we kind of agree that we'll keep it as it is, except for certain circumstances when there's an item, we could switch meetings around. Is that what we're saying?
It seemed, yes, I understand that that's what you're saying, but it seemed like the SWAB was leaning to do it the other way with having water resources, if it's going to be a
First.
separate meeting, separate, but first, having water resources first and having maybe a joint middle meeting like Dan suggested. Or a portion of a joint meeting. Logistically, Eric and I would have to figure out how that would work.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing you said makes the most sense. If you're talking about a topic in which SWAB needs a recommendation from water resources, then if one of those items is on the agenda, then we just switch times and water resources would meet first, and then SWAB would meet at the later time that particular month.
I think so. And
I think that's probably the best way to handle it, if everybody agrees.
I agree.
and we don't have to fix it today. We can just try it for 4 or 5 months.
Is that okay with you, Susan?
Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay,
What we're trying to do is not have what happened this month where, the item on, well, it was multiple items were on the council agenda that had never gone to SWAB. And so we had to approve them at council contingent on SWAB approving them the next night. And
I
if
think-
SWAB hadn't approved them, that would have been problematic.
The council approval was contingent on the SWAB approving it, so I think that was less problematic. The problem
Well, it
really,
would have been problematic if SWAB hadn't approved it.
correct.
And then we would have been starting over for a month.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Part of that problem was the timing of the bid and trying to deal with FEMA and have our ducks aligned prior to getting an answer from FEMA. We could have pushed
Right.
it out. We could have pushed it out into July, but that doesn't allow to get the work done. And we may end up having to do that anyway because we don't have a FEMA answer.
Right, but it's still,
But we tried to make it as efficient as we could, even if it wasn't the normal path to get there.
And you can't fix every single thing. We're gonna have these things once in a while, so we'll do the best we can. And
yes.
I agree.
okay. So next item then is to return to in-person meetings or keep Zoom meetings.
And just to report on what SWAB decided was to defer that until the September meeting and stay virtual until that point. Let IT and the council work through the hybrid solutions because we have very few visitors to our meetings. So they deferred it until the September meeting.
Yeah, I don't know, our committee's members, how do you feel about it?
I would like in-person meetings. I'm kind of tired of Zoom meetings.
Yeah,
I would like to be able to see a person's facial expressions, their gestures, Zoom is rather impersonal. It's easier for me to listen and know what someone's talking about if I'm seeing them in person.
Yeah, I agree. Only thing, our meeting room is very small and we have people there. It's pretty close quarters.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true.
This is Julie. If you want to go to in-person meetings, then I would want some kind of proof of vaccination or the wearing of masks.
Yeah, that room is really, and we get crowded with a lot of people with water resource meetings. SWAB doesn't have very many, but we do.
Yeah,
We could use a council chamber, couldn't we, Dan?
Yeah, as long as something else wasn't scheduled, you certainly could, yes.
I think there are rec programs on Wednesday nights. Is that right?
But
Dan?
I know that there used to be anyway. I don't know what's going on now, so, but we could do what SWUB did because council hasn't made a determination yet. We haven't gotten back from staff kind of a plan, so council hasn't acted on it yet. We could defer this item until, I think we were going to have in our first meeting in July, I think staff was going to come to council with kind of some options and a plan. So if we wish to, as a Water Resources Committee, if we wish, we could defer this until after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you know, Dane County's made great progress in getting vaccinated, and the number of COVID cases has gone down, but I think this is going to be around for a couple of years. There's so many variants out there, and a lot of people aren't getting vaccinated. I just don't see this going away right away.
Yeah, there's a new Nile variant, and this assumption that everyone's vaccinated, I don't think is accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't assume everyone's vaccinated. And when I made that statement, I wasn't thinking about the size of the room. Yes, it would be very hard to distance ourselves.
Impossible in that room. If it's open to the public, we can't keep them out.
We could put them on Zoom.
Yeah, right. Okay, I wonder if we could do that.
There is a potential for hybrid meetings, and I think we're working through that too, or IT is. Like Dan said, maybe we'll know more. We can defer this till July, and maybe we'll have a better idea.
Well, I'll make a motion that we defer this to our July meeting, and then see what information we have then from a tech standpoint.
Okay. That sounds, I'll second that motion. Ms. Warren.
So what we're saying is June and July will be Zoom meetings though, at this
Correct.
point. Yep.
This is June.
Correct.
Sorry,
Whatever.
July will be Zoom, and then we'll have.
If you say so.
It all runs together.
You join me, Jim.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? This item was sort of a bookkeeping thing, and Eric and I talked about it. And in the past, staff has, with Gary, didn't make recommendations on things, and I talked to Eric about it. And I kind of like have a staff recommendation on some issues. How does the rest of the committee feel about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate staff's input.
Yeah, Gary thought that might influence our discussions and what we come up with our solutions. And I think it would help facilitate our meetings and maybe move them along faster. So the staff looks at them a lot more spends more time looking at them than we do. So I think getting their input would help us out.
Agreed.
The other thing that I didn't mention is that we talk about some issues sometimes, and I don't know what happens. Some developments, I don't know if they take place or they fall by the wayside. Would it be possible to, in some of the significant ones where we spend a lot of time, like that apartment building on Pleasant View Road, evidently it failed, but I guess I would like to hear if things are approved or failed or pulled or whatever happens to them. Would that be possible?
We could have a kind of a standing item, Warren, that, just to update by, a list of plan commission projects or whatever that, was referred to Water Resources prior. Sure.
Yeah.
I like that idea also. Sometimes I wonder what's happened to whatever we've discussed a month or 2 or 3 ago. So I like that idea.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened to ones on Pleasant View Road. Dan, do you know why they pulled out?
They just couldn't, for various different reasons, they couldn't make the project work.
Yeah, it looked like it was marginal.
Yep.
Yeah. So they pulled out, it wasn't denied.
What's that?
It wasn't denied by the city. They just pulled out.
I think they did deny it, and were unable to meet the criterias of the denials.
Right, it was denied in their original format, and they ended up not bringing it back.
Yeah. Okay. So if we agree on that, I guess could you do that, Eric?
Yeah, will do.
Okay. Doesn't have to be lengthy. We don't want to spend a lot of time doing it, but and there aren't that many big ones like that take place.
No, I think it's a great idea, Warren.
Okay.
I think it could be as simple as cutting the minutes out of the city council minutes and just including those about what happens with the item. Because ultimately, once Plan Commission and Water Resources and all those other folks approve it, it goes to the council. And if it was denied at the council, then you would know that way.
Yeah, we don't get much, when you read the minutes from the council, you don't get much information though.
Well, and sometimes what happens is we've got a few projects like the behavioral health hospital where the approvals were, gosh, 2-3 years ago now, and they're just now finishing the project. So
Yeah.
sometimes these take a long time. So you do, even as a member of the council, you sometimes lose track of where some of these are in the process.
Yeah, okay. So one other thing before we adjourn is if you have any comments on that stormwater presentation, please send them to me. I made some assumptions on urbanization and climate change, and that's my opinion. So if someone's got some information they agree with me or disagree, let me know. So is there anything else? If not, a motion for adjournment?
So move. Bakuber.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Have a good
thank
night.
you.